Hey parents, I've been thinking a lot about Halloween lately, and I don't often share personal stories when I'm coaching because my attention is on the parents who are in front of me and their values, their goals, their pain points, the characteristics and qualities of the humans that they're raising. So I don't bring my personal life into it unless it's really relevant to the topic at hand. But thinking about Halloween, there's actually a moment from my childhood that I wanted to share with you that I hope illustrates an important message. So this Halloween, I would have been 4 or 5 years old, and my birthday was right before Halloween, so I would have just turned 4 or 5 years old. And I grew up on a farm in, rural Canada, early 80s, 3 brothers, and not a lot of money. But my mom is an incredible seamstress. She could sew just about anything. So at the time, there were no Spirit of Halloween stores to go out and buy costumes. And so my mom would put a ton of time and effort and care and expertise into sewing our costumes by hand. She would source all of the materials and, create these really amazing costumes for us. When we were little, she would come up with the idea and then she would create it. But once we were old enough to have opinions of our own, we would tell her what we wanted, and she put so much love into making these costumes. So I remember this particular Halloween. Like I said, I was 4 or 5 years old, and Mom was helping us get dressed for trick-or-treating. So at this point, I had a brother who was 1.5 years older and a brother who was 2.5 years younger. My baby brother wasn't born yet. But needless to say, we're talking about 3 kids under 5 or 6. And my mom was tired. She had gotten all of us into our costumes and she was getting ready to take the photo. And again, this was before digital cameras, so this was like a one-shot deal. She had her film and she was gonna get the best picture that she could. And it was time. I was a clown that year. Mom had made this beautiful clown costume for me. And it was time to put the mask on. And I remember the mask coming onto my face and me freaking out. And I was not a meltdown kid. So I remember the few times that I actually had a full body, nervous system, bottom up reaction to something. And this was one of those times. I still remember 40 plus years later, the feeling of that mask coming onto my face, right? And again, we're talking early 80s. So this mask was not high quality, right? It was stiff, it was crunchy plastic, it was scratchy, it had tiny little nostril holes and tiny little eye slits. And as it was coming over my face, it felt like I was being entombed alive. And I just remember having this bottom up nervous system reaction. There was no way I was putting this mask on my face. And it would have been so easy for my mom to try and strong arm me into wearing that mask, right? Early 80s, this was a time when parenting was very much about, do as I say because I'm the grown up. And she had 3 little kids and she'd worked so hard on these costumes. It would have been so easy for her to say, you are going to wear that mask and I am going to get that picture and we are going to show your grandparents this costume that I made for you. But she didn't do any of that. She understood that this was just too much to ask of me. So instead, she went to the drawer and she pulled out some markers because we weren't planning for this. She didn't have face paint or, clown makeup kicking around the house. And it was 5 o'clock on Halloween day in rural Canada. Nothing was open. So she took magic marker and she drew a nose on me and some color on my cheeks and some freckle dots with marker. And that was it. I was a clown. I was so happy. And even though 40 plus years later, a lot of the details of that day are gone from my memory, the feeling lives in my nervous system. That feeling of being respected, that feeling of my grown-up recognizing that this thing was too much for me, and recognizing that my experience of Halloween was more important than her need to get photos to, show to other people. So I guess the point I want to make is Halloween can be a lot of pressure for parents, especially with Instagram, with social media, right? You see these photos of these beautifully curated photo shoots and all these happy kids going out trick-or-treating. And often behind that, there's a lot of pressure and a lot of expectation. So I guess my message for you this Halloween is respect who your kids are. Respect their sensory profiles, respect their temperaments, respect that the thought of putting on a costume or putting on a mask or going out and taking candy from strangers, knocking on doors, saying hello to people they don't know, all of these things can put a ton of pressure on. And respect that their experience matters more than putting those pictures up on social media. Because knowing that you are their safe person and their trusted person and that you are going to respect what their bodies need, that's going to live inside of them forever. And it's going to impact your relationship with them for the rest of your lives. So happy Halloween. I hope that it is wonderful for all of your families. And thanks to my mom for being the person that I needed on that day all those years ago.